Emma, thanks so much for your time. I mean, I suppose the first question to ask would be, why is the UK so interested in helping Africa address its problem?
Well, I think we have been for a very long time, and we have a huge amount of capability and expertise in the UK that we're seeing doing business all across the world, including in Africa. I think the time has now come for us to really use this opportunity of the UK's departure from the European Union to expand our effort across Africa and bring that British expertise here to the continent in bigger numbers, in more to have a stronger presence than it currently has.
So how much exactly are you looking to deploy? I'm seeing some £21.4 billion, is that correct?
Well, I think numbers can be misleading.
Right.
The £21.4 billion is a conglomeration of the risk appetite that the UK's Export Credit Agency has in Africa at the moment. And our colleagues there in the Export Credit Agency are constantly looking at levels of risk in every country. And what we have seen over recent months and years is actually a doubling of that risk appetite in Africa, which reflects what we see as a growing sort of economic and political stability here across the continent. So that £21 billion is sort of loans and guarantees that, that today we could access to support buyers in Africa buying British, to really to focus on infrastructure in its broadest sense. But that is a very movable number, I'm delighted to say.
All right, for sure. But perhaps let's bring it down. Let's not make it so broad, because you know Africa, we're a big continent. So where exactly is the UK seeing opportunities the most, you know, to engage with players on the ground?
Well, the Department for International Trade that I represent has offices in 21 countries across Africa, and we're able to then use the network of embassies and high commissions that we have across the other countries to really understand where those opportunities lie. And I'll be honest, we're seeing opportunities everywhere. I mean, particularly in infrastructure, which is so critical, I think, to enabling any country to really pull its people out of poverty where that exists, and to really enable trade and investment that we want to see.
And in terms of the partners that you're looking for, right now the narrative here in South Africa is that of growing small businesses and giving them more opportunities. But when we talk about infrastructure, particularly hard infrastructure, it's usually you know, areas that small businesses can't really engage. I mean, is there a plan to also look at them, and if so, how?
I'm really glad you asked that, actually, because obviously with major infrastructure projects, they tend to be led by these sort of massive companies. One of the key things for the UK is really to mobilise the supply chain to support those big companies. And that can be a UK supply chain, but one of the things that characterises British major contracting infrastructure companies is that they will draw their supply chain from all over the world, so that we can guarantee that we have the most competitive, the best top quality, most technologically advanced supply chain companies, all providing that project and enabling that project to deliver. So one of the things that we've created here in Africa is the Africa Infrastructure Board, which brings together UK construction and mining companies, infrastructure companies, with the UK government representatives. And what we're trying to do there is really mobilise the supply chain to support the delivery of big infrastructure projects.
And obviously there's no such thing as a free lunch. There are terms and conditions for the support. So perhaps spell it out. I see you looking for at least 20% UK content.
Yes, I think that makes the UK an incredibly competitive offer in terms of that kind of export credit agency lending and guarantees. So many of our competitors require considerably more local content or UK content, US content, Canadian content. We require a minimum of 20% UK content, and I think that reflects the international flavour of British companies. That, you know, as I was saying earlier, that they really do work with the best companies. They don't feel restricted to just using UK companies.
You know, when we're talking about content, I mean, I'm looking at the areas, your mining and construction. I mean, these are areas that the UK and other partners generally come to Africa for. So when we're talking about content, what exactly do we mean?
I think it varies so much. So this can be anything across the entire project. So it's not just about building a road or a railway line or providing infrastructure for a mine. This is also about water and energy. Anything that actually enables an economy to function, including actually sort of looking at smart cities and how we use existing infrastructure smarter and more sustainably. And the UK is great at that sort of thing.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned energy, because I know a lot of the investments into infrastructure have gone into that energy, particularly the renewable energy space. And right now in South Africa, we've got that deal kind of on ice. I mean, what are your sentiments towards that? Is that a concern? And, will it help or sort of bring in more investments should those deals that are being put on ice get melted? I don't know what the term is.
Well, I think, from my perspective, I'm here to try and promote more trade and investment between the UK and Africa. Sure. So any regulatory advances that enable that to happen, any decisions that are taken locally by our African hosts that enables business is good from my perspective. So I'm always really keen to see how we can help improve the business environment, make it easier for companies, not just UK companies, but all companies, frankly, to really improve that trade and investment relationship and build that shared prosperity for everybody.
And I take it you're pro-free continental trade area in Africa?
Well, I think we were delighted to see that progress yesterday. The UK is a very strong proponent of free trade globally. And
except you're pulling out.
Well, we're certainly not pulling out of free trade. We're leaving the European Union. Right. But one of the key drivers for that is actually to enable us to engage in freer and more open trade with partners, including in Africa.